You are welcome for the next episode from the unit friction. Now we can discuss about some benefits of friction where it is used. You observe these things from your life situations. For example, in your shoes and its soles glued. Why? That means the sole of your shoes glued, and also tires that is threaded. The tires of car, bus, etc. threaded. What for this done? When you glue the sole of our shoes, it provides better grip. That provides better grip, so that we can walk without any danger, or we can walk smoothly. Tires of car, bus, truck and JCB etc. threaded, so that provide greater friction, hence it can move safely. For that purpose we do this. We do these things. We, in some cases, purposefully increase friction. Purposefully we increase friction in certain cases. For example, we use brake pads in bicycles. That brake pads, when the cycle moves, that brake pads is not in contact with the wheel. But when we press the lever of the bicycle, that brake pads come in contact, and that helps to stop the bicycle. So here also friction helps to stop the bicycle. And also, when you observe some of the kabaddi players, they rub their hands with the soil. That also for the purpose of getting more friction to catch the players of other teams tightly. Then another example that is gymnastics use coerced substance in their hands. Use coerced substance in their hands to get more friction, so that they can catch the bar and other things very tightly. Here are we use the benefits of friction. Examples of friction where we use in our day-to-day life. Example, shoes. In our shoes, its soles are glued that provide more friction. Hence, we can walk freely or more safely. And tires threaded that provide more grip, so that it will move the vehicle safely. Then the brake pads in bicycle also helps to stop the bicycle when we apply brake. And the gymnastics and kabaddi players also use some trick to get more friction. In this case, here are benefits we using friction. But in certain case, this friction also bad for us. So that we want to reduce friction. We want to reduce or decrease friction. For that, different methods we apply. Example, in a carom board, we use fine powder. In a carom board, we use fine powder to make the surface of the carrom board its friction to reduce. To reduce friction, we use fine powder in carrom board, and also when we use in pulley or small machines or sewing machines, some oil or hinges of door. When we use oil, it moves freely and easily. So there we reduce friction. There we reduce friction in where carrom board and also in machines or hinges we use. When we use oil, grease or graphite. When we use oil, grease or graphite in the moving parts of a machine, that form a thin layer in between the moving parts. What we use? We use either oil, grease or graphite. Then it forms a thin layer in between the moving parts, so that avoid the direct rubbing of the moving parts. That means the thin layer in between the moving parts avoid the direct rubbing of moving parts, so that that part move easily or that reduce friction. And the material or substances such as oil, grease, graphite, etc. we use in machines, and that are called lubricants. These materials, oil, grease or graphite, these are all called lubricants. For what purpose it is we using there? It is to reduce friction. What is the function of lubricant? It helps to reduce friction in between the moving parts. How it reduces? It forms a thin layer between the moving parts, and that thin layer reduce the irregularities of the surface, so that surface moves easily, hence reduce friction. Hence the efficiency of the engine increase. When we reduce friction by using lubricant, what happens to the efficiency of the engine? Efficiency of the engine increase. So we can increase efficiency, or otherwise there will be loss of energy in the form of heat or otherwise. That we can reduce. Hence efficiency we can increase by using these lubricants. But in certain machines we cannot use this lubricant. There we use air cushions as a lubricant. Air cushion we use to reduce friction instead of lubricant. Now, two things you want to remember. In some case we make use of benefits of friction, where we use in so many examples you can find out. For some examples we discussed here, where the soles grooved shoes. That means soles of shoes grooved to reduce to increase friction. Tires threaded, and also using brake pads, and the kabaddi players rub with the soil, and also gymnasts use coarse substance, etc. to increase friction. But in some other case, friction we want to reduce. Example, in carrom board when we play, there we want to reduce friction. There we use some fine powder, or when we open the door, if it is difficult to open, then we use some oil in its hinges so that we can open it. Then also oil, grease, graphite, etc. we use the moving parts of the machine that form a thin layer, and it reduces the friction, and such material are called lubricants, and that we use to lubricants. Now, another method to reduce friction are using wheels. We know sliding friction and also static friction. This static friction is later than sliding friction. But when we use wheels, suppose you can do one activity, place some round pencil on a table and above you place a notebook and try to move. That will be very easy. When the pencil is rolling, that book move easily. And also when you see some luggage bag with the wheels, so that we can pull it easily, because there a rolling friction is coming. Rolling friction is less than which sliding friction. Rolling friction is less than sliding friction, so that we use ball bearings in the moving part of the machines to convert sliding friction into rolling friction. What we use? Ball bearings. Ball bearings we use in the moving parts of machine to convert sliding friction into rolling friction, because this rolling friction is smaller than sliding friction. Very common example is in ceiling fan and bicycle we use hub and axles. Here the sliding friction they converted into rolling friction by using hub and axles in the ceiling fan and also in bicycles. Why we use ball bearings? Why we use ball bearings? Because rolling friction, that is when one body rolls over the surface of another, the friction there arise or the force there arise is the rolling friction. When one surface rolls over the another, the friction there arise or force there produced is called a rolling friction, and that friction is the less than sliding friction. So we use ball bearings. What purpose these ball bearings we use? These ball bearings can convert what this sliding friction into rolling friction. Sliding friction into rolling friction. So that we use this ball bearings. Where one example for that hub and axles of what is ceiling fan and bicycles, we use this ball bearings to convert this sliding to rolling friction. Now we want to discuss about another type of friction. You know what is actually fluid? What is a fluid? All liquids. All liquids and gases are fluids. That means when we take a liquid or a gas, then that is a fluid. So we know that is air. It is very light. Even though it provides friction when an object moves along it. Air is very light offers a force when an object or a body moves through it. Similarly, when we take the case of water, when an object, for example fish or any other boat or anything moving in water, water is a liquid. That also provides a force that opposes the motion through it. And such a type of force they offer is called friction of fluid. Friction of fluid. This also called drag. It is also called drag. That is when body is moving through a liquid or a gas. So through a fluid that offers a resistance or a force opposite to the direction of motion, and that force is called friction of fluid or drag. We used to say instead of friction of fluid, that means we can say as a drag, liquid drag we used to say. So we want to reduce here also friction. When to reduce friction in fluid such as liquid or gas, we observe some natural object. Suppose when we consider a moving object through air, we observe the natural objects, natural things that moving through air. Example, birds. And also when we consider an object which is constantly moving through water, example fish. So to move these things, the resistance, that is friction offered by them, must be minimum. So we also used to construct to reduce friction object like this shape. Example, when we consider aeroplane, we make the shape of birds because we know birds constantly or continuously moving through air. Okay. When it moves through air, the friction offered by air resistance or the friction of air in it is very less. Because of that, it can move freely. So we make use plane in the shape of birds. Similarly, through water, fish continuously move. So to move it through water, it's a loss of energy or friction. That means the force against its motion must be minimum. So we make use of bodies like the shape of fish, such as a boat, ship, etc., made in the shape of fish, and in that way when we make use things is called streamlining. What it is called streamlining, so that we can reduce friction. Now we come across different types of friction. Which are they and what is the different ways? First we discussed about static friction. Which is static friction? What is actually static friction? When we consider a body at rest and we apply the force, at first it may not move. When we gradually increase force or it or a particular force, it starts to move. That force which is required to move that object, just to move that object, that much force is the static friction also. That means we apply a force on the object in this direction when the body is just starts to move, this force and the friction acting opposite, they are equal. At that case, that is the static friction. Then we discussed about sliding friction. That means when the body starts to move, then also there is friction. That friction is sliding friction. This sliding friction is slightly less than static friction. And the reason for that, when the body starts to move, the locking of irregularities decreases. Locking of or interlocking of irregularities decrease. So the sliding friction becomes slightly less than. Sliding friction is slightly less than static friction. Then we come across what are the circumstances we use advantages of friction, and some other case we make use of to reduce friction. Then what is the disadvantage of friction? Mainly a part of the energy we give in to a machine or anything is losing in the form of heat. Then we come across what is a rolling friction. That means when one body rolls over the surface of another, the force that opposes the motion is called rolling friction. When one body rolls over the surface of another, the force that opposes the motion is called rolling friction. This rolling friction is less than sliding friction. Then why we use ball bearings in machines? Because by using ball bearings we can convert sliding friction to rolling friction. We can convert sliding friction to rolling friction, and in some case we make use of it. Why we use ball bearings? Ball bearings can change this sliding friction to rolling friction. Then we make shape of. That means another method is a stream line. That means to reduce friction in fluids. To reduce friction in fluids, we make the shape of birds and fish. Suppose boat, aeroplane, etc. We make in the shape of what is birds or fish, and that way we can reduce friction, and it is called streamlining. That means making in the shape of these things. Okay. Now we can go through this chapter once again. Which are the points you want to remember from this unit? First of all, what is friction? Friction is a force. Friction is a force. Friction is a force which opposes the relative motion of one surface over another. Friction is a force that opposes the relative motion between two surfaces. That force acts between two surfaces. That force exerting in the two surfaces also. Second point you want to remember again. Then friction depends on nature of the surface. Friction depends on nature of the surface. That is nature of the two surfaces. If one surface is very rough, then friction will increase. That is, friction depends on the nature of the surface. That you want to remember. If the surface is smooth, that is, for a given pair of surface, if the surface is smooth, then friction is less. When we taking a pair of surface, if the surface is smooth one, then friction is less. Then third things you want to remember. Suppose how hard the surface first. If the surface is first, suppose I showed it before. Suppose one book is placed on a table, then we can pull it easily. If 2 or 3 more book is placed there, then that first book is more hardly pressed, then it is more difficult. That means friction is more. So how hard the surface pressed, friction also that much more. Then when a body is at rest, that friction is static friction. When a body is at rest, that friction is static friction. And it end when the body starts to move. That means static friction end when the body starts to move. That means static friction become maximum when the body just starts to move. Then once the body or when the body starts to move, then the friction there coming into play is sliding friction. Once the body starts to move, then the friction there is sliding friction. If the both of the surface are rough, that is rough surface, if we use, we can make more friction or we get more friction. In some case, we use a rough surface to make or to get more friction. Example, sole of the shoe and also tire, etc. are made rough because to get more friction in order to move it safely. Then in some cases friction becomes undesirable, especially in between the moving parts of machines. In between the moving parts of machines, if there is friction, that causes wear and tear. That wear and tear causes that damaging the machine parts. So there to avoid, we use some lubricants to undesirability of friction. And if we want to reduce it, then we use lubricants in the moving parts. How the lubricant works? Lubricant forms a thin layer in between the moving parts and it avoids the direct rubbing of the moving parts. Then next things is about rolling friction. You discussed what is the importance of this rolling friction. Is it greater or smaller than sliding friction? That is rolling friction is less than, smaller than sliding friction. So in the machines moving parts, in the moving parts of machine, there we change this rolling friction to this sliding friction to this sliding friction converted into rolling friction by using ball bearings. This ball bearings can convert this sliding friction to rolling friction. And in fluid, we make object to move insuitable to reduce friction. Example like the shape of ship, boat, etc. Okay, these are the things you want to remember from this unit friction. Now I think you got idea about how friction acting and what is the reason for friction, where it is more and where it is less, how we can reduce it, what are the different ways to reduce friction. Okay, now we can answer questions from the units. First question, fill in the blanks. Friction opposes dash between the surface in contact with each other. Answer, friction opposes the relative motion. The relative motion between the surface in contact. Next one, friction depends on dash of surfaces. Friction depends on nature of the surfaces. Third, produces dash. Friction produces heat. Friction produces heat in between the moving parts. The sprinkle of powder on carom board dash friction. Sprinkle of powder on carom board reduces friction. Next, sliding friction dash than static friction. Sliding friction is less than static friction. Sliding friction is less than static friction. Second question. 4 children were asked to arrange forces due to rolling, static and sliding friction in the descending order. In the descending order means decreasing order. Their arrangements are given below. Choose the correct arrangement. Here I am reading correct statement only. Maximum friction static, then sliding, rolling. This is the decreasing order of friction. Once again, static, sliding, rolling. Now, third question. Anita runs her toy car on dry marble floor, wet marble floor, newspaper and towel spread on a floor. The force of friction acting on the car on different surfaces in the increasing order. You are right. Among these frictional force least wet marble floor, then dry marble floor, newspaper and towel. Once again, wet marble floor, dry marble floor, newspaper and towel. Now, fourth question. Suppose you are writing desk is tilted a little. Suppose your writing desk is tilted a little. A book kept on it starts sliding down. Show the direction of friction force acting on it. Book is moving downward, so the friction is upward. Friction acting upward. You spill a bucket of soapy water on a marble floor accidentally. Would it make easier or more difficult for you to walk on the floor? Why? It becomes more difficult to walk because friction reduced. In order to walk, as friction is necessary. Explain why sportsmen use shoes with a spike. Because we know when more pressed, friction becomes more. When the object is more pressed, friction becomes more. Now, in seventh question, Iqbal has to push lighter box. And the question is, Iqbal has to push a lighter box and Seema has to push a similar heavier box on the same floor. Who will have to apply larger force and why? Who will have to apply larger force? Answer Seema, because heavier box is more pressed. Heavier box is more pressed, so friction is more there. Then question number 8, explain why sliding friction is less than static friction. Explain why sliding friction is less than static friction. Because once body starts to slide, then the irregularities on the surface and its interlock not come into action. That means when the body starts to move, then the interlock of irregularities decrease or that does not get enough time to interlock, so sliding friction is less than static friction. Now, ninth question, give example to show that friction is both a front and fork. So many examples given before. Some cases friction is given as advantage and some other cases you can take from it. Now, question number 10, explain why objects moving in fluids must have special shapes. We know by observing nature, birds, fish, etc. moves constantly or most of the time. That to move or move to them, the friction must be minimum. So we make use of we make use of the shape of that fish or birds. That is the reason we make a special shape when object moves in air or water. Okay, with this we can wind up this class.